Hi everyone. So I'm just going to give it a minute and see who hops on. And I've obviously made an announcement that this was going to go live at some point today. So I think quite a lot of you will be watching this on the replay. So I'm not going to waste too much time waiting for people to hop on because I know some of you will. So as the title explains, this is about understanding my way of looking at nutrition, which is nutritional therapy, for want of a better term. That's what I'm qualified in. And that's what I love. That's what I have used to completely transform dogs' ailments or behaviours. And also it's so nourishing for the dog owner as well to practice this way of feeding dogs. It means we don't have to micromanage every meal. We don't even have to really get to the point where we're managing it on a weekly basis. Like, it becomes so much effortless and so simple, and it is almost an intellectual way of feeding. We don't need to know all the mechanistic ins and outs of every single nutrient when we practice nutritional therapy. And that's why I love it, because we are supposed to own dogs to have fun. You know, we're really here to have fun. And, you know, that is, our dogs have come to open our hearts up for us, as many of you who follow me in terms of Canine Flow know, and really even showing us about naturalness and about natural foods. This is all what they're doing for us. You know, this becomes a reflection in us. If we're starting to look at what our dog is eating, we really need to be looking at what we're eating as well, because that's their lesson for us at that time. And that's why they're here, to support us. So we need to be giving back to them as well. And I know it can be tough to know how to balance a dog's meal. And I know that it can be tempting, very, very tempting, because of the mind's fears, to manage every single meal or their diet in some way. But with nutritional therapy, you get to the stage and you get to the level of understanding where that doesn't have to be a huge issue. Now, I've got a lot to go through in this. I've got my list of things I wanted to bring up for you. I've also got a couple of questions that people have asked me. So if you're here, because I can see the numbers moving, please do say hello. Tell me your dog's name, maybe what they're eating, whatever you want to put, really, where you are in the world, you know, because this is your chance to have your question answered as well. So there's obviously that opportunity as well. So first of all, I just want to say, for those of you who don't know who I am, I know a lot of you logging in will do, but I've worked in the pet industry itself for maybe 25 years now. And I started off in a kennel cattery where we accepted no-sodes. So at the age of 16, I went to work at this place, and I was thrown into this natural dog care world. Although I didn't know a lot about it for dogs, luckily enough, I knew a fair bit about that way of being through my mum, who had been vegetarian, had grown a lot of our food, you know, made our dresses for us, that kind of thing. When we were kids. So she was that kind of person. So energetically, I was kind of aligned with it, and maybe that was the reason I created working there. Who knows? But I was working here, and we used to accept the no-sode vaccinations. The lady would use, obviously, the no-sodes on her own dog. She was really big on homeopathy, and she would raw feed her own dog. So from about 25 years ago, I was, I hope that adds up to my age. I'm not doing the maths now, but we would feed her dogs raw, and she had Pyreneans. I think we had 5. We had 7 in the time I was there, but 5 probably when I started, or maybe 4. And she had Lhasa Apso. So at the other end of the scale, she had smaller dogs. So I was feeding at both ends of the scale dogs. And throughout the course of the 20 odd years that I worked here, we would help pet owners, dog owners, hi Patricia, to make differences in their animals' well-being, ailments. A lot of allergies would come up, especially seasonal allergies, because obviously we were busier in the summer being a kennel cattery. It wasn't a rescue kennel, it was one where people would go on holiday and then they would leave their animal with you. or go away. So we saw the animals repetitively, and over that period of time it gave me a massive education into what works and what doesn't, and also into just how reliant we've become actually on not taking responsibility for our own animals and just heading to the vet or heading to the bag to feed them, you know. So and when we work naturally with animals whose owners had got into that habit, because it does become a habit really, and we tell ourselves we haven't got the time to make our dogs food, and we tell ourselves we haven't got the time to do things like meditate or go out for a walk under the trees, or, you know, but we have to make time for these things that nourish us. If we don't do this, we're not wholeheartedly there for our dog, and that's what our dog wants, is for us to be wholeheartedly there with them. So I then, towards the end of my time at that kennels, wrote a book called The Best Dog Diet Ever, which still, as far as I know today, is the only book that has a pictorial diagram explanation of what is going on inside your dog when it eats food. So it's got all the biology in it. There's loads in it. I won't go into it too much. You can find it on Amazon. It's been out since 2012. Many of you probably got it that are watching this. And as a result of that, because I put all my knowledge in a book, although it wasn't the bestseller that I maybe imagined that it would be, what it did do is it was given to people that work within the pet food industry, and they saw the knowledge that I had that I put into the book, and this started me off on the path of consulting for nutrition for pet food industry in a nutritional fashion. So I was able to take this brilliant nutritional therapy teachings that I had done, I've missed that bit out, but I was able to take them forward into the pet food industry. And it also gave me a massive insight into how that works as well, because really without an understanding of how that works, why they're doing the things we're doing, a lot can be blank, a lot cannot make sense. So when I was at the kennels, I did lots and lots of courses, lots of behaviour stuff and T-touch and Reiki healing and all this kind of stuff as well. But I did a nutritional therapy course, and it was for people because it was the only one that I could find. There was none for dogs back then. We're talking quite a long time ago, and there was hardly any holistic vets really on the scene then. And I would research and I would ask and speak to holistic vets if things were the same with dogs, and gradually throughout the course you can imagine I found that most of them actually were, because really biologically inside the gut systems aren't that much different. Yes, there's massive differences in terms of the length of the gut system and what they should or shouldn't be eating, but in terms of how the body functions holistically in a nutritional therapy basis, that there's actually not much difference. I mean, if you look at the inside even of a snake, you'll see that they've got the same organs. They might be in a different, well, they're kind of not even in a different order. If you look, I was amazed when I saw this. We're all made of the same stuff. You know, it's just about understanding how we can utilize this knowledge. So I was working obviously as this pet food industry nutrition consultant, and as I said, it really opened my eyes. And one of the questions that I've been asked today, in fact two really, because I was asked by somebody just directly about the best kind of kibble for their dog, and someone else wrote a series of other questions, and then underneath wrote, and also when I go away, what do I take with me, what do I use? So that's kind of the same question, I think. They want something that is portable, obviously. So we're talking something that's going to be slightly more processed, easy to carry around. So the reason nutritional therapy is different and why I value it so much is because it recognises the body's ability to heal and balance itself. Okay, so it totally recognises that given the right conditions, the body, and the dog's body especially, can heal, can balance, can deal with stuff itself if it's given the right conditions to do so. And in nutritional therapy, rather than micromanaging the meal, we look at the body as it is, the state of being that we're presented with, first of all. and we make sure that the body is given what it needs to be in those right conditions. Okay, so we're not trying to get an utterly balanced meal every single time. We're looking at the bigger picture of the whole dog, what's going on for that dog. That means there may be conditions, there may be things in the body. You could even say it's like imbalances or chemical something going on. Not imbalances in terms of nutrition, though. I'll come to what I mean in a minute. It'd be, for instance, something like hydration or microbiome. So something broader of what's going on that is stopping the dog from healing and balancing itself. Okay, so this can happen. The dogs can balance themselves. They can even create nutrients. Even our gut systems can create nutrients given the need to do so. Our bodies and their bodies store nutrients for later use. But even those functions don't happen appropriately if the conditions are not right. And what I see happening in the dog industry is we are worrying too much about the individual little things, and we're not looking at what's actually going on in terms of the bigger picture. Now, there's someone else who said this once, but not maybe in the same way as I'm doing, and maybe not with such a strong explanation. And that guy is Dr. Richard Patton. Now, some of you may know this book. If you don't know this book, borrow it from somewhere, try and get it. Don't know if it's available on Kindle. I was mega lucky, or the universe wanted me to have it when I bought it, because I got it for like, oh God, it was so cheap. It was like a tenner or something, whereas now some of the bits, I think it's out of print unless it's been reprinted. I know Rodney Habib is a big fan of his and has met him as well. He actually, in an interview he once did, he said a similar thing to me, that we're worrying too much. I can't remember his exact sentence, but he used the term when he was asked about things like complete and balanced. He said the term, "it doesn't matter." And what he meant was, that's not what we should be looking at. And of course there was uproar, and everyone was like, whoa, like, he shouldn't be saying that. Well, maybe he's not as good as we thought he was, and da-da-da. And what I got from that is, and having seen his subsequent reply, because he realised what had happened afterwards, this poor guy went back probably to lecturing at Nottingham University or wherever he was, I don't know, and then came back to like a barrage of stuff, I think. And he said a similar thing to what I've said to you just now, that we need to be looking at the bigger picture, and we are obsessed with this balance, and it's a fear mind-based thing. And if we're going to really connect with our dogs, if we're going to really get what they are here to teach us, we have to come back to our hearts and stop going into the mind and stop trying to intellectualize everything. And that will happen when you appreciate the bigger picture and you see things in the way that they work. Now, okay, where am I at now? So basically what I would say that it is, in a sense, and to use a term that Rupert Sheldrake uses a lot, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, it's a self-organizing system, your dog's body. Everything about your dog's body is set up for balance. Everything. And it's our job to keep it in the condition that it can be in balance, not to do its balancing job for it. Okay, and this is a big thing, and it just makes it just so easy to be with your dog, and less worry, and anyway. This morning I saw a thing on Facebook and I thought, oh my God, that's so classic, I should see that today, because somebody had excitedly put up one of their dog's favourite meals. I can't even remember what group it was on now. And she just got like this massive load of stuff, like, you can't feed this to your dog all the time, and it's not enough of this, not enough of that. They hadn't even read the post. She was excited. She already raw fed. Wow, like how amazing is that? She already raw fed, and we're then like having this massive kind of thing, and this girl was just excited, and it wasn't even what the dog ate all the time. She had to explain herself, and we give ourselves like such a hard time anyway, individually. Let's not do it to each other. We don't know. If we're micromanaging to the point where we're saying that meal she's put on and that photo isn't balanced enough, then we don't really know what's going on. But there's always a bigger picture, always a bigger picture. So this self-organizing system, it needs to be supported, okay? Because when we look at things mechanistically, that's when we're in what's really separation. Anything we're looking at mechanistically, is like traditional vet care, or traditional, or what we call traditional, though obviously ancient. Really, if you think about it, the traditions aren't like that. The traditions are natural dog care. But so the way we are with vets, when you go to a vet in general, with vet care, and obviously with humans as well, medical care is very separate. Everything's quite separate, and it's quite mechanistic. But what we're looking to do is address this back into equality and unity and understanding the bigger picture. And when we say, oh, you know, we want to feed our dogs naturally or by nature, because that's what dogs eat in nature, we have to be honouring how nature actually works, because nature manage meals. Okay, nature doesn't balance everything or have complete. I've got so much to get through because I want to explain to you as well what the pet food industry mean by complete and balanced as well, so that for those of you who are watching this and are like, well, a bit overwhelmed, like we will start with like some really basics to understand what the pet food industry means by complete and balanced as well. So who's here? Say hello. I can see the numbers going up and up, and I don't know who's here. Oh, I can see Sharon's here. Hi, Sharon. And hello, hi, Monty's mum, like Teresa, isn't it? You should change your thing to you. You're important enough. Then we will know it's you, just like that. So, right, one of the things I want to understand, and I'm going to bring this forward right now, I've got it far down my list, but I'm going to bring it forward now. I'm being told to do that, is because when a dog is born, or when you take on a rescue dog, or even like when you get your puppy at 8 weeks, okay, they'll already have, even when they're born, the second they come out of their mother, they will have a nutritional profile, okay, and they will have like, in terms of the nutritional elements like your hydration and your microbiome and things like that I'll talk about later, they will have a profile on that as well. They will have a set way, okay? And no dog is going to be the same, okay? They're not born with a completely blank canvas or with a completely balanced canvas that you then add to for the rest of their life, okay? So you can have, also because puppies work in a self-organising system as well, which you'll know from Dr. Isla Fishburne's work, they work in a self-organising system as well. So they will, each will have a slightly different profile. So even if they came from the same litter, you're not getting exactly the same dog, chemically even, if you want to say that it's a chemical thing going on in terms of nutrition in the body. So it's impossible then to then go and put every single one of those puppies on the same food and say that you're feeding them a balanced diet, because if one's lower in magnesium, higher in calcium, and the next one's lower in iron, higher in vitamin C, or vice versa, and you just give them all the same, okay, you're not addressing the profile that you were given in the first place. So it's impossible, I hope this makes sense, for us to say that there is one diet that fits every single dog for that reason, because you're not dealing with something starting at a set level, you're dealing with something that is already fluctuated. So like you might have 3 dogs in your household, you might get them all at the same time, you might get them all from the same litter, please don't write anything about behaviour stuff for that, but you might do this just for an example, and you might have one that's lower in magnesium, one that's lower in iron, one that's lower in calcium, to take the negative way. You feed them all the same. That dog is going to have calcium issues for the rest of its life. Okay, that dog is going to have magnesium issues for the rest of its life. Do you see what I mean? What we need to be doing is giving the body the ability to rebalance itself, so that, and it will do it. Okay, it will do it if given the correct conditions to do so. And I am going to talk about those conditions. So no dog is ever at the same starting place. So we can never say that any meal is completely balanced, okay? Because it has to be down to that individual dog. And it's your job as a pet owner or a conscious pet parent to understand that and nail these conditions and nail nutritional therapy. I hope this is making a bit of sense. I don't think complete and balanced is really understood in that way. Now, when your dog is born, of course, they're going to have a whole different profile, or when you get them, they're going to have a whole different profile of microbiome. They're going to have a whole different profile of lipid hydration. They're going to be all completely different. So it's never right to be saying, and if you do any pet education, pet nutrition education, and it's trying to tell you that this is what a dog needs, that's not the course to do. Because we need to be looking at the bigger picture now. People ask me all the time, what do I think of courses? I never look at other courses because I'm too busy doing my own stuff, and people don't send them to me for free, just from my opinion, so I don't know. But what I would say is, if somebody's trying to tell you that something is 100% right, that your dog absolutely needs this nutrient or absolutely needs this way of feeding to be balanced, then that's not right. We need to be looking at individuals. We need to be looking at the whole, your individual dog within the whole picture, and giving it what it needs to balance itself. So also now, nature doesn't look at complete, does it? And that's like an obvious thing. You know, it doesn't try to be complete. Now, we know dogs will self-organize themselves, or any animals will self-organize themselves to a degree as well. We know this as well because they'll do something like self-selection. So they will choose the things that they need. And in nature, animals do this all the time. I know elephants are amazing at it. There's loads of studies on elephants doing this. And there's a really great book, I forget the name of him now, but he has a herd of elephants that he's raising, and there's a baby one that's poorly. And he says in the book, and it's quite sad in a way because he doesn't understand what's going on, but the elephant's trying to get the garlic from the kitchen counter through the window with its trunk, and he stops him. And I just think, oh, he really needed that, you know, like, and he died, the elephant, as well, which is sad. But, you know, reading that story, I was like, wow, that's such an example of how that animal's trying to self-medicate. They will look for things, and they're looking on this vibrational way, because self-organization doesn't happen chemically. It's not a chemical that suddenly says to the dog, you need to find more garlic, or you need to find more magnesium, or what it might be. It's not a thought. It's happening on a vibrational level. That's why all creatures have a VNO. Now, whether we had a VNO, a vomal nasal organ, when at one point, I don't know, we might have done, and we're not using it anymore, or it's just that we're different in some way. But creatures have this because they need to vibrationally read what's in front of them so that they can take that in and know whether it's right for them. It's an inner knowing. It's a self-organizing system knowing. You know, if they don't need it, they're not going to be drawn to it energetically, magnetically attracted to it. So let's talk about complete and balance in terms of the pet food industry. So the word complete, we'll take that first. So there are obviously a few guidelines that pet food manufacturers need to follow in order to be able to use the term complete on their bag of dog food. So the label is allowed to have it on there. And that is that for puppies and adult dogs, it's slightly different, but they need to have a certain amount of protein. Okay. So that's like quite an easy thing for them to do, you know, and it can be any kind of protein as well. I'm sure lots of us know this, you know, in days gone by, it was soya and pea and all sorts. And sometimes I think it still is, but hopefully we're moving a little bit beyond that now. So they've got to have that. So that's what, and then they have to have a set of nutrients as well included. Now, these companies are not, that nobody goes and tests them afterwards, and they don't test their own food. This is far too costly. So what they do is they add something called a premix. So it's like going to Holland and Barrett and getting a multivitamin and mineral, but it's in a powder form, okay? And that's added to the food. Now, it's added as well at slightly different stages depending on who it is that's manufacturing the food as well. So there may be slight heat damage on that as well, because obviously anything like heat and light will change molecular structure. That's why we've got Bunsen burners out at school to do experiments, because heat and light changes things. So it breaks bonds, so it changes molecules. It will turn water into steam, for instance, and that kind of thing. So the cooking implications and the processing implications of even relying on a premix is pretty low, in my opinion, as well. But the premixes that I have seen, there are very, very few premixes, which is this vitamin and mineral supplement, that are bioavailable. And what I mean by that is when they get in the body, the cells can resonate with them, can use them, can transport them, can do stuff with them. They can be stored properly because they're recognised by the body. So they're natural form vitamins and minerals when all that can happen. But what happens a lot of the time, especially in the case of minerals, is that they're not bioavailable because they come from a rock form rather than a plant form. And this is the same in our supplements as well. A lot of our supplements are the same. If you go to the doctors and get given iron supplements, generally it's rock-based form. It's sometimes, I don't know, maybe I haven't done it or seen anybody do it for so long, so I don't want to write that off completely, but maybe they do plant-based ones at the doctors now. But in general, I've seen that they're not, that they're rock-based. And this is so vital because we can't assimilate that. We can't do anything, and the dog can't do anything with that. So for instance, there are at the moment some people really trying to push home cooked, ready-made diets. And these have got a premix in them that they've obviously also got the protein level required. And this premix is allows them to have the word complete, but they're not complete because their magnesium, for instance, and other minerals that I've seen in the premix are not bioavailable. There's also no bone content in them because they're being cooked. So they've used a pet mince that wasn't ground in with bone. They haven't used the carcass. They've used like some other organs and meat to make it. The pet mince that they're using, so there's no bone in it. So for me, that's like amazingly reason why we shouldn't be using them. Yes, when the dog first eats that kind of food, the gut system will have a makeover, the microbiome will have a makeover, there'll be far more lipid hydration, far more water hydration, and there will be benefits. But long term, it's not a complete food. And to me, that's wrong, that they're using, or pet food industry is able to use these premixes when they're not even bioavailable. So what they've said is, yes, we've put it in. They've not said the dog's going to be able to use it. So that's one of the things we really need to understand. So when people say to me, what's the best kibble to use? I struggle because there's some that are making a difference, like cold press will obviously still be more likely to have lipid hydration, which is like your good fats, because the heat isn't involved in the processing. Although I'd be looking at what was their meat of choice in the first place, because if it was meat meal, then there would have been heat involved making that meat meal in the first place before it went into the kibble manufacturing machine to come out as bobbles. Even though there was no heat used in the kibble manufacturing machine, potentially it was a meat meal to begin with, and that again negates the lipid hydration. It's very difficult to say that because we're not supposed to be feeding or eating ourselves even processed food. No creature on the planet in nature looks for processed food. Now, if you've got a dog that's been fed a healthy raw fresh food diet, or even lightly cooked fresh food diet for a while, they're very, very healthy, and you go away for a weekend and you just want to leave kibble for your grandma to feed them because it's easier for a day, then I'm sure your dog will be fine. Although sometimes those are the dogs that say, well, what was that? And they have diarrhea the next day and they're like, well, I can't handle that, give me back my real food. So it can go either way really, but we're overthinking it because it depends on the dog. It's going to totally depend on the dog. And the other thing is as well, while you're away, you could use that as a fasting time for the dog. If you go onto my canine mentorship group, there are 2 videos that I've added in the last week about fasting for dogs. One is with a nutritional expert, Nora Lenz from nomorevetbills.com, and the other one is with a mentor of that group who did this, and it worked. She fasted her dogs for 48 hours and it worked. So, where was I? So I've gone off on a tangent now. So yeah, hopefully that gives you an understand what this means with complete in terms of it being on pet food. Now, complete in terms of when we're talking about the raw communities, these are belief systems. Okay, back 25 years ago when I started feeding raw dogs, and we didn't have like hardly any forums, there might have been the odd one, like we just got on with it. We didn't check if it was 80-10-10, if it was 50-20-40, or that probably doesn't even add to 100, but you see what I mean? Like we didn't have any of that. We just did it. And there's also a book that I read when I was dog sitting years ago in this lady's ramshackle old gorgeous house that I was staying in. It had all sorts of fun stuff in it, and one was this book about how to feed dogs, and it was from the turn of the century, like in sort of 1900s, like right at the end. So fascinated by this book, and they were feeding the way that Wendy Volhard from Volhard Nutrition still advocates today. And that's an interesting website to look at as well, her website. So they were feeding a lot of meat, and I presume the dog probably got table scraps as well, but they were also using oats back then as well. And it was just so interesting. And they was obviously as well still talking about herbs and things. Veterinary medicine wasn't the way it is now. So they were still talking about plants, which made it interesting. But this knowledge of like how people have done things and our idea of whether we're getting it right or wrong, it's coming back here. It's not living from here that our dogs are here to help us to be. And when we come from here and we see things with a bigger picture, and we see things with equality and unity and not mechanistically and separately, that's when we really start to nail understanding how to feed our dogs a complete and balanced diet. So, who said hi? Let's, Sharon said hi, hello. And Teresa, hi Terry. Louise says, it's live, but a great watched. Yeah, well, you can share it, it'll be on the replay. Sharon says, on wellness, bloods, my two are apparently within range. Energetically, they are total opposite regarding tissue states. Interesting. So that's like what I was saying about them being different. Yeah, and because traditional Chinese medicine has a different way of looking at it as well, doesn't it? It has a different way of looking at it as well. Well, it's very similar to nutritional therapy in terms of it wants things to be supported to self-organize itself, but it tends to give more things to create to do that. So it will like add in herbs or add in different ways of doing that, which is cool. There's nothing wrong with that. You're kind of giving them a helping hand, because it may be that you've had them since birth, or since you've had them, they've had this imbalance that you couldn't see. And even though you tried to micromanage and balance the meal for all this time, they still end up with a health issue because they didn't start from a level playing field to begin with, you know? So we have to take responsibility to be understanding what is going on with our dogs, which I know a lot of you are that are watching this. So Sharon said it's literally about balancing an individual ecosystem as it's needed for that system. It is, and what I want to do is I want to give you a list, or at least the top ones that I would include in your dog's diet to ensure that they are in the conditions to create this balance, to create their self-organizing system. And to be in that self-organizing system and have the best chance to eliminate toxins as well, because when they're in that state of being, this is the best chance for them. It also really, really helps with things like behavior as well. So I am going to do that. So don't go anywhere yet. I just want to say hello to everyone. Hi, Mary. Oh, hi, Elaine. Wow, I haven't seen you for a while. Hope everything's cool up in Scotland. So, right. What have I got written here? Okay, so we need to talk about balance within the pet food industry. So really the balance comes from this premix as well. That really is, that's kind of where it comes from, to be honest. That's how they consider it balanced, by it having a certain set of nutrients which are under either the FEDIAF or the AFCO or whichever organisation is creating this. And these are very basic as well, these premixes. They only really have the basic stuff in them. So if your dog is deficient in some other bits and pieces that aren't in there, you might never fill that again by relying on the balance of what they call a premix as well, which is sad. So really, with the pet food industry in terms of balance, they're not looking at it from everything an animal needs for health. They're just looking at it from that mechanistic point of view, really, of what certain nutrients do. and what they believe. And really, originally, these were like, I mean, I wasn't there back then, and I haven't ever read a paper about this, but this is a general consensus that I've been taught and that I've generally seen, and everyone says that they use studies of up to a certain amount of weeks to determine what nutrients are needed by dogs. And the dogs don't even necessarily need to survive the study, or not all of them anyway, for it to be deemed. So they're looking, and I'm sure these days there's different chemical mechanistic ways of seeing how much iron a dog might need, and there's probably loads more science that goes into it. But the fact that it is science and it's mechanistic and it's not recognizing how the dog's body actually works, and that they're not recognizing that they don't start at a level playing field, to me, it just immediately negates it, because they're not really providing everything the dog needs. The fact they can allow them to be in unbioavailable form as well, that's a big thing that we need to be addressing and thinking about. It's so difficult for me to recommend something within the pet food industry, even if we're saying grain is bad, so grain-free kibble is better. It might not be, because that grain-free kibble might have the worst premix ever, and your dog misses out on all the other nutrients as well as what might potentially not have been started with a level playing field. So it's really difficult. I just think we can't get away from the fact that in nature, everything is balancing itself, and we need to be providing that. As I've sounded like a broken record now in a way, aren't I? But nothing in nature tries this complete and balanced. It really doesn't. So if we really are saying that we're feeding dogs for nature, we don't want to be preaching any of the raw belief systems. We want to be supporting owners to really find out what's right for their dog as an individual, and to do these things to create the conditions that are right for the dog. Now, the other thing I wanted to discuss as well, which I've mentioned slightly already, is what I call the fasting paradox, or because it's me, we're going to call it paradox. So, paradox or paradox of fasting, okay, and this I find fascinating, is that there's a guy in Costa Rica called Lauren Lockman. Now, like him or not, he runs a really wonderfully run fasting detox center in Costa Rica, and his studies have shown that people who go in there with deficiencies, okay, so they haven't got the nutrients, go in there and fast, and then when they have their tests, whether it's blood or lymph tests, whatever it might be, they're okay. So after fasting and not putting it in for a period of time, they then self-organize themselves. That is so key to understand, because it isn't always about putting it back in. And there's a few reasons for this. One is because when you do fast, you are giving even if you're just doing it to your dog for 48 hours, I don't think a day is enough. I'm not a massive advocate of fasting, by the way. This is just something I find interesting and I want to share with you as part of this, because for some of you, it might be right for your dog. It might not be right for everyone's dog. But when you're fasting, you're, in a sense, providing some of the conditions needed for the dog to rebalance, or for yourself to rebalance in that case. So like something like microbiome would rebalance itself. So like I was saying with the fresh food that you can order that's low in minerals, it still covers things like hydration. It puts the two aspects of hydration back in that the dog would otherwise have been missing out on. So even though it doesn't have the natural form vitamins and minerals, it's kind of getting there, and fasting will do that as well. So you're not putting in natural form vitamins and minerals. However, you are doing some of the other things that on a nutritional therapy basis, the dog would need to rebalance itself, to be a self-organizing system. So you're actually supporting them. So that I find fascinating, and I can't believe we've nearly been talking for 40 minutes. This is crazy. I did used to do day workshops on things like this. I hopefully won't keep you for more than an hour, but anyway. So that's really worth understanding as well. Also, what's really worth understanding is that no nutrient works alone. Again, it's back to this equality and unity over separation and mechanistically looking at the body and in trying to intellectualize everything and micromanage. It's not about that, because, for instance, calcium does nothing in the body without magnesium. So if you're just giving your dog calcium because you think it needs it, or trying to add lots of calcium to make the meal look balanced so that you can post balance pictures up on Facebook that people aren't going to complain about, then you might be missing the point, because again, that calcium might not even be bioavailable, because it gets in there, it can't meet its best friend magnesium and go anywhere and do anything, because they meet up and they do things. Iron, vitamin C, as I mentioned before, they're interrelated massively. So often when you're iron deficient, or your dog might be iron deficient, it's usually vitamin C deficient as well. And yes, they can make their own vitamin C, but they do need to be in these conditions to do all this kind of thing. It's not just going to happen like magic. You need to be in the right conditions to do these. So, right. Because the other thing is, we could say, well, we're going to add some of these things back into our dog's kibble. So we could say, okay, I'm going to carry on feeding kibble because for whatever reason I'm not ready to take responsibility for whatever, I'm not ready to address the fears or concerns I have about this, or I'm just like, oh, I'm not ready to understand how to do it or to look into it, whatever the reason might be. And they're all perfectly valid fears. They hang around in the brain for so flipping long, you know, they'll become our reality. So I'm not judging anyone for that. I've been there myself in loads of different situations, not just with dogs. But we do really have to take responsibility at some point. But we can put things on top of kibble, and I see this quite often as well. And the argument is that it's better that somebody does that than just keeps feeding kibble. And you could say that, yes. However, if the kibble is keeping the dog's body in the unoptimized state, very often doesn't really make a great deal of difference and can sometimes cause more problems than it's worth. If the dog, for instance, has been fed kibble for quite a while and it now has a sensitive stomach of some kind, then adding stuff on top might not give the reaction that the owner wants, and then they might stop doing it, and then they're scared of fresh food. So I don't know, maybe that's my fear, but that's just an example that I know has happened. And I laugh when I see these pictures of kibble with stuff on top of it, because if you took the kibble out of the bowl, the stuff that was on top of it would have more nutritional value than what was actually in the kibble. So, you know, if you're going to add like a tin of sardines on top of your dog's food, you may as well just chuck the kibble, give them the sardines that day or that meal, and start looking into why is it that you want to do this? What is it you think they're not getting? What is it you think's wrong? And start looking deeper, because at that point, your dog is giving you massive lessons to look at nature and to look at as well. And I will keep coming back to this because that's why they call me the spiritual dog trainer. It's about coming back out of mechanistic and into equality. That's what your dog is actually showing you. It's here to reduce separation and reduce this way of looking at things that we've had for a very, very long time. So if you're feeling like you want to put fresh stuff on your dog's food, this is, believe it or not, part of a spiritual journey, in that sense that you're being pulled away from things that function in a separation and a mechanistic fashion and a mind over heart fashion. So let's get to, before it gets too late, so we're now on nearly 43 minutes, some of the factors that your dog needs. I call them nutritional elements. Okay, so in blogs that I've got on my website, you might find nutritional elements written quite often. I call them nutritional elements, so I didn't think of a better word for them really, because they're not direct nutrients, but for me, they're the things your dog's body needs to self-organize, self-regulate itself. So one of them, well, quite a few I've mentioned already, but the two or three that I really want you to get is the hydration aspect. So the water hydration is so important, and it's no good just thinking dogs can go off and drink water and they'll get all the water that they need. When there's moisture-rich food, it's completely different matter, and the molecules of the water will react differently with the molecules in the food, and it carries a vibration as well, molecularly, the water. So it just needs to be in our dog's food really, and not just in a bowl for them to drink. water is, or a lack of water hydration is very much linked to inflammation as well. So lipid hydration, and this is, so I'm talking about your essential fats. So the most well-known one is omega-3, but obviously there's omega-7, there's omega-9, there's all different ones, but that your dog needs. But with lipid hydration, another thing to really, really understand as well about processed dog food is that lipid, the omega-3, for instance, is only included in the balanced, complete and balanced guidelines for a puppy. When you get to the adult section, and anyone can look at this because I'm pretty sure it's available on the PDF website, you see an amount for puppy, you get to adult, a line, as if to say they don't need it, or we don't include it, we don't consider it important, which is crazy, absolutely crazy, because these essential fatty acids are really how a dog makes its energy. So that alone, again, makes you think, well, why would I want to balance anything to a standard set of guidelines that aren't considering my dog? It's just really crazy. So they obviously do need these essential fatty acids. And as I mentioned as well before, you know, it's the heat and light that change molecules, and these are really, really unstable. One of the reasons they do such good in the body is because they're unstable when they get in there. So they sort of fire off and connect and do stuff and get involved in other nutrients and other what would be the word, other reactions in the body. Because they're unstable, they're very, like, their molecule bonds will break very easily. So they will go off and do this and be much more of use and much more useful to the dog than a different set of nutrients, for instance. So they do really, really need these. And they are something that we really need to be providing. And even sometimes if a dog hasn't had them for a while, you find adding them back in makes a difference to the dog. Well, of course it will, because they're getting closer to that optimized condition that they need to be in to self-organize themselves. So people say, oh, you know, feed my dog kibble, I then give it yummy, go, I start giving salmon oil and all these good things happen. Well, it will, because all of a sudden they're having something which pushes them that bit closer. So one of the vital nutritional elements that you're adding back in to your dog's diet. So those two forms of hydration are just really, really important. It's about having a flexible body in that sense as well. The cells are flexible, not just the whole body or the joints, but everything about them is flexible. They're also really, really vibrational, the hydration as well. So the other thing is enzymes. So enzymes are so important, and this is where feeding raw really comes into it, because most enzymes get killed off at about 45 centigrade. So usually, even if you're lightly cooking the food, it's going to be lacking in enzymes. And what I'm talking about is not necessarily digestive enzymes, but they're like a vital part of the food of vitality. And you would want to have a food that has these in it, so that your dog has got that vital spark, so that the enzymes can go in. And that what enzymes do is they make stuff happen in the body. So they make interactions. They would make calcium and magnesium meet, for instance, and then they would make calcium and magnesium do something. So they make everything more bioavailable. They make everything happen quicker. They make detoxing happen quicker. They're needed by the organs. You're nourishing the organs into this fashion to do this, by having these enzymes as well. And then the other big one is the microbiome. Okay, so I mentioned that before, and that could be a whole hour's lecture on itself, I think, with microbiome. We don't need to know the ins and outs of what, to be honest, there's probably loads inside us and in dogs that haven't even been found and labelled yet. It is an emerging part of nutritional science as well, and it is an emerging part of natural dog care, this microbiome side of things. And this is just the massivest way that your dog will care for itself and self-organize itself, is by having those in the food. And it's one of the reasons why a dog can, again, be on some kind of processed food that hasn't got these other nutritional elements in, but you add in something like kefir or sauerkraut and changes start to happen, because again, it's pushing the dog that a little bit closer to the conditions it needs to be in to self-organize and balance and create life again inside that dog's body. and heal itself. So to me, when we use supplements like that, like the oils and like the kefir, they're sticky plasters over not looking at the bigger picture. And I'm not saying don't do it, because if that's literally in the instance all you can do, then you're going to have to do that. But the idea is to understand the full bigger picture and understand really what's going on, so that we can create the conditions that the dog needs. So emotions are massively linked as well, especially to microbiome. So our emotions, the dog's stress, the environment around the dog, all these things influence the microbiome. Vaccines influence the microbiome because the gut lining is the immune system. Okay, it's a little bit in the bone marrow, but basically the gut lining is the immune system. There's so many different things that influence microbiome that, yeah, really probably even if our dog hasn't got any particular problems, it's worth giving them stuff that will help with those conditions. And that way, then you're supporting them. And the thing about this, that already I can see numbers going up and down now, you know, it may be, you might think, oh, I've heard this before, but unless you're doing every single one of these nutritional elements, unless we're including it all, then that's why things don't shift and change. So prebiotics as well, that's another nutritional element that they really, really need. Now, processed food, no processed food has these things. That's why our dogs are so ill. You know, like we've not got dogs that are healthy anymore, because they're not set up to have the conditions where they can balance themselves, where they can self-organize, where they can detox themselves, where their organs can be super healthy inside. They're just not fed like that anymore, or they haven't been for a very long time. So this isn't about saying you have to feed raw. This is about saying, let's give real food, actual food. And then if it has to be cooked and they're not going to get enzymes, then you start looking at other things that might have enzymes in, or just adding something in that might have some enzymes in it that is still like not so dead, if you like. So that could be something like some, if you wanted to use like pilchards or something like that. But I'm talking like, and even kefir as well is going to have some enzymes in it, because it's a living thing. So you could feed lightly cooked, and that may very well provide the conditions for your dog to be balancing itself. Now, what this doesn't mean when we're talking about nutritional therapy is you could just be feeding one type of raw meat, and then because it's got the hydrations, the enzymes, the microbiome to a degree, like tripe, for instance, take tripe, that suddenly your dog would have everything it needs. Okay, so it is, you still have to look at variety. Variety has got to be the key, because what that also does is it contributes to the health of the microbiome. But we have to be in this, we have to be in a state where we really understand what it is our dogs need individually, and getting to that place where we can really understand them as individuals. And when you switch from any kind of processed food, because obviously some processed foods are wet foods, we call them wet foods, don't we? So they're like tins, and they're going to have a level of moisture content. They're still not going to have the enzymes, still not going to have the microbiome, still not going to have necessarily the prebiotics, and the lipid hydration will be changed, but they've got the water in it as well. So, you know, a lot of people might be feeding that and feeling like they're feeding natural, but it's like, I think we really need to understand that even if we're lightly cooking food, it's just got to be real. There's no way around it, really. So hopefully this has answered those two questions from the ladies that were asking. I'm just going to go quickly on to the last question, because I think it was about weight. If I remember rightly, it was about weight. So the lady's dog has been on a raw diet for a couple of years, and it started to lose weight. Now, obviously, you'd first be looking at medical stuff, but I'm pretty sure that she's got that nailed, and that's why she's asking about nutrition. So the thing about it is, and I never forget, I had a conversation with Dr. Connor Brady about this once. a good 5 or 6 years ago, that we are used to seeing dogs bigger. So this is one element. It's not the only answer, but we are used to seeing dogs bigger than they are. And in the message, the lady said, oh, lots of my friends are commenting, and my vet said it would get better if he was 1 pound heavier, which isn't a great deal, really, although it's a smaller dog. But we will always find people to back up our fears. I mean, naturally, we'll always find people to back up our passions as well. But whatever we're fearful of, we will or complaining about, we will usually find somebody to back that up. So if you're worried that your dog is losing weight, you are going to create people commenting on it. Absolutely. If you're really proud of your dog's new collar, you are going to get people discussing it and commenting on it. That's how energy works magnetically. So I wouldn't take any notice of people commenting. You have to go within. And in the message, the lady does say that she is really trying to work out what's best for her dog and not take that on board, if you like. So dogs, the message I had with Dr. Conor Brady, or the discussion, it wasn't that. It was about the fact that we are used to seeing dogs fatter or bigger than they are, and that actually perhaps what we see as this vet score of whether they're underweight or overweight is not necessarily what we should be using. Okay, so the other thing as well is, and don't hate me now, but going back to what they fed in the 1900s then, in that book that I read, and still Wendy Volhard will talk about this, if you are really, really worried and your dog is definitely losing weight and there is no medical condition, try adding a little bit of oats. They would be my only thing that I would use, is oats. Not necessarily loads in the bowl, we're talking a small dog anyway, but just using that one thing can change the weight of your dog, and they don't need to stay on it even. But when especially if you're using organic, really nice ones, you can even get gluten-free if you're still scared of gluten, but it's a case of sometimes we have to think about what can we use that's still within the parameters of the self-organizing system, that isn't going to stop them from being able to balance themselves. So that really would be my maybe recommendation, but it's so difficult without knowing more about what the dog's already eating as well, and what the history is, because the other thing about the message is it does say that the dog had allergies, so that immediately says to me that something's going on in their gut system. So it could just be that whatever you're feeding isn't being absorbed into the body enough to create the muscle or create whatever it is that is going to be considered as the weight gain. So there's that to think about as well. So let's just see if anyone's written any questions. Loads of people have. Sorry, I wasn't scrolling it down. I'm not saying 80-10-10 isn't balanced. I never said that. What I'm saying is it's a belief system. It doesn't make it right. And you found that belief system works for your dog. So that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. But the fact we're even still thinking that whether it's balanced or not, we need to come away from this. You found what's right for your dog in terms of that, but you still fill it with all different variety, obviously taking intolerances and allergies into consideration. The point is, we give ourselves such a hard time. This is the major point that I want to get across, for trying to micromanage everything and for trying to get it right, and judging ourselves and being in fear and concern in case we don't get it right. And this often happens subconsciously as well. And we don't need to, because if we are already feeding food that gives these conditions, which raw does, 100% it does, then this is already happening. This balancing within the dog's body is already happening. This self-organizing is already happening. So, hi Rachel. Sharon says self-organization can work because you can release stagnation and hence allow natural flow. Again, it is about energy flow as well. And Carolyn has joined. I don't know how long ago that was. Hello. So the other thing I just want to say before I go is about the amount to feed, because some of you might immediately think, oh, well, actually, I'd quite like to go over to a fresh food. if you are watching this and thinking, I just want to switch away from a processed food, then I would start off by going to one of the big companies that have ready-made, so it's a lot easier for you to start off like that, and it's amazing that you're even doing that. So that needs to be where it ends in terms of judgment. Because you are doing that, and that's amazing, and they have people that work for them that can help you and support you, and just get started. That would be my big thing, and then you can worry down the line about home making. And it may only be that the dog stays on the ready-made food for a month. It may be that they stay on a variety of that brand's ready-made foods for ages, you know. But it's just a case of get started in something that's ready-made for you, and they will have feeding guidelines on. But what that brings me to my literal final point, I promise, about how to know how much to feed. Back in the day, we only had the percentage amount to go by. So yes, calories were invented, but it wasn't what we used within the raw feeding world at all, within the real food feeding world. Percentages were a lot easier to maintain, and you could easily adjust them as well without a calculator, maths particularly. You could easily adjust this depending on how your dog looked that day or what your dog did that day. Calories aren't something that fit within the nutritional therapy profile. They're mechanistic separation based. They actually came from the coal industry, and they were used by the diet industry a long time ago. So probably about the time that book came out that I was mentioning earlier. And they've just got really brainwashed with this. When you go personally as a human onto a calorie controlled diet, you find in order to stick to the calories you're given, you eat a lot more plants. And what happens is that gives your body the conditions that I've been discussing that we need to create for dogs. So for humans, it's slightly different, of course. They obviously need all the hydration, and they need their microbiome to be in a good fashion for them to be on that weight loss program, for it to actually work. And it's not the fact you're reducing calories, it's the fact you're eating things that are getting the organs working again, which are plants, and they're addressing your microbiome issues that you might have. That's why those calorie controlled diets appear to work, because when you think about it, someone who is an alcoholic, for instance, is drinking a lot of calories, but because their organs aren't functioning properly, their body doesn't function properly. You can even get things that say they're 0 calorie drinks, so fizzy drinks that say they're 0 calorie. And these things, it's almost like, oh, well, you can just drink them and you won't put any weight on. But actually they could contribute to weight gain because they're not nourishing the organs. In fact, they're doing anything but that. They're probably upsetting the microbiome and upsetting the organs, which could lead to weight gain. So we have to move away from this understanding of calories. And this has always been my belief since I studied nutritional therapy, and since it made sense to me, really. And then what nailed the nail in the coffin for me is when I worked within the pet food industry, and I saw the differences in the amounts. So when you had a pet food company that was using calories to define their feeding guidelines, it always came up way less. And some pet food companies went for that because it made the food seem cheaper to feed over a period of time. Others didn't, and they reverted back to their percentages, so, and doing it that way, but it always came out less. Again, that is about, it's too much mind and not enough heart. It doesn't need to be complicated to know the percentages of how much to feed a dog, which obviously range from 1.5% to 5%, to up to 5%, or even more if it's a growing puppy. So that's, if you're going to start home cooking, if you're going to switch on to home cooking, that's what you need to be looking at first, is the amount to feed. That really is the only bit you need to get right to begin with, is the amount to feed. Because again, you'll adjust that, because it might not actually work for your dog having 3 or 4%. You might need to go down to 2%, or, you have to get started though. But what will happen, of course, is as your dog gets closer and closer into the state of being, it can self-organize itself. It will start to regulate and become its optimal self, its healthy self. And you'll see changes. You'll see changes happening. You might see detoxing happening, but it's better out than in than how long it's been in there for. You might see changes happening, you might see weight changes happening, but this is all part of the organising system, and we don't need to be giving ourselves such a hard time about getting it right. We need to be giving them what they need. First and foremost, it's like the golden rule, first and foremost, let's get them into the right conditions for health. And then if there's still issues going on, you maybe want to do Nutri-Scan or whatever it might be to find out if there's a particular nutrient, because obviously they weren't at a level playing field to begin with, and even 6 years down the line they might still be not at that level playing field to begin with, despite being in the optimum conditions. You don't know, every dog's different, so you can do your Nutri-Scan afterwards. But that needs to be our first go-to, which is what Richard Pitcairn was trying to say when he got Richard Patton was trying to say when he got shot down that time. So some of you are still on. Thank you for watching. I might stick this up on my YouTube as well. I have been talking for quite a while, and I hope it's been useful. And obviously, if you want to know any more information, you can just let me know. And I look forward to connecting with you again at some point when I'm doing a live about food, or whether I'm doing something about equality in terms of behaviour and how we can shift equality rather than separation in behaviour as well. Thanks, guys. Oh, I suppose I better give my website. For those of you who might watch it at some point, which is just www.canineflow.com. Okay.